Well, this is very surprising news, Rachel, because there's been much skepticism here in Canada that the Iranians would actually come clean as to what actually happened with that disaster. They've been very reluctant to release any information, very reluctant to have Canadian authorities to take part in the crash investigation, even though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been demanding it. So this admission is at least somewhat of a step forward. You should know that this disaster has hit Canada very, very hard, given that so many of the passengers who died were Canadian citizens. I should say that the number just within the last couple of hours was revised downward. It was thought to be 63 Canadians on board, but the Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, just announced a couple of hours ago that that's been revised down to 57. And there have been really heartrending scenes over the last couple of days, dominating news coverage here of the people killed in that crash. We're talking engineers, university professors, PhD students, children, whole families wiped out. People now traveling to Iran to try to recover the remains of their loved ones. The really heartrending scenes at airports with one husband in particular headed back to try to recover the remains of his wife and daughter. So this at least is in an awfully grim situation, at least a moment of clarity. But I should say that there are still many questions that remain to be answered, including, okay, if it was an accident, who's responsible? How could this have happened, given that there were other flights in the air? As we all know, tracking systems are extremely sophisticated. They should have been able to pick out that this was a passenger aircraft. How could this have happened, even in such a heightened a situation of tension, given what was going on and the tensions between Iran and the United States on that evening when Iran was launching an attack on that American base in Iraq. But at least a moment of clarity, given this is just broken in the last few minutes, and it's late in the evening on a Friday night here in Eastern Canada, and no response yet from the federal government, as you can imagine. And we'll expect to be hearing more from the Prime Minister sometime in the next, perhaps in the next day. I should say the skepticism was so high about whether the Iranians would actually come clean on what happened in this, that the Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Champagne, announced just within the last few hours an international working group of countries, including other nationals from Sweden and Ukraine and elsewhere. They were going to work together to try to press the Iranians to give a full explanation as to what happened. So at least they have admitted to this key aspect of it, but certainly there will be many more questions to be asked about how it actually happened.
Yeah, certainly. Still many questions, as you said. And as you've mentioned, there were 57 Canadians on board. And I know you said that there hasn't been a response yet from the Canadian government, given that it is late on Friday night there in Canada. But certainly this will be seen as a positive step forward, at least in terms of the investigation, correct?
Well, at least it's a moment of clarity, a moment of truth that frankly wasn't really expected. Canada's former ambassador to Iran, and this is going back a few years because we haven't had diplomatic relations with Iran for some years, has been giving interviews saying he doubted very much that the Iranians would come clean on this. So this is an unexpected development, and what is an awfully grim situation, an awfully heartrending situation for so many families across this country. So at least there is this small moment of truth. I mean, there's no way that you can say this is going to help them deal with their grief anymore, but at least it is one answer.